I'm a no-sleep mod, and I will never escape. Written by Area 51 Express.
When I was accepted to be a moderator, I was ecstatic. Finally, I could be a part of the great work here on Nosleep. I would fully apply my passion for horror in keeping this community healthy and true to its innovative niche. When you're working on a sub like Nosleep, with millions of subscribers and thousands of active users, it's essential you know your business. The work is far more complex than winding up word count bots. There are tremendous expectations on one's knowledge of all things horror, which necessitates a standard level of competency from all mods. They required me to meet that standard by attending orientation. My acceptance email detailed the physical address where the training would take place. I was initially surprised it wasn't being conducted online. It was a fleeting thought, however. I wasn't joining some small-time operation. This was the premier destination for written horror on the internet. The weekend arrived and I drove a few towns over. I was to meet an instructor by the name of Camden on the 3rd floor at an address my phone said was downtown. I went through the main doors of one of those old factory buildings. The place was so ancient and centrally located, it was inexplicable no one had demolished it for more condos. I found the reception area on the 3rd floor easily enough and sat in an uncomfortable metal chair. The only other furniture in the room was a vacant reception desk, complete with an old boxy monitor. The place was dusty and run down. I surmised it must have been the cheapest place to hold this meeting. It suited me fine. If anything, the creepy vibe set the tone for our discussion. There was a door on each wall with discoloring where nameplates once reside. The rooms probably belonged to managers or foremen when the place was operational. I waited about 15 minutes past the scheduled meeting time when the door I entered through burst open. A woman wearing a pinstripe dress walked to the center of the room. She had blonde hair pulled up into a tight bun and was tapping away on a tablet. "Hello, I started." She spun.
"Yes, Kyle, I know. Pleasure."
She rattled off in a perfunctory tone without looking up from her tablet. She gave a vague flick of her wrist towards the door on the right and told me my first task was through there. I bristled at the terse greeting, but appreciated her authority and obvious commitment to work. I discovered a similarly ruined office. Peeling green wallpaper streaked the walls, and yellowed paper huddled in heaps. Sunlight struggled to pierce the grimy windows on the far wall, which dyed the room a drab brown. I heard the door lock behind me. I thought it was a cute touch. The latch was on my side. It harkened to a time I played one of those escape rooms. With no obvious supervision or direction, I inferred my task must be discovering something. There was little in the way of furniture, just an armchair with shredded upholstery positioned behind an old wooden desk. A wardrobe skulked in the corner to my left. I trudged through the debris and started rifling through desk drawers. I stopped when I heard a thump contrast my shuffling papers. Another thump, and I knew something was here with me. The intensity of the noise increased, and I zeroed in on the wardrobe. My breath caught in the back of my throat as I inched towards the sound. My senses heightened for any clue as to what could be banging against the rotten doors of the wardrobe. The burst of the splintering wood shocked me all the more when the doors exploded open. A stiff, bony leg planted itself on the floor and dragged the rest of its clattering form out. Crust and dust flaked off of aged joints as what appeared to be an anatomically human unfolded itself. Its head creaked up, revealing the indifferent gaze of a sightless skull. I took a step back and the thing lunged at me. Its movements were now fluid and its composition lied. I took back everything I thought about this being a cheap operation. They must have spared no expense on an animatronic of this quality. I understood. I understood that in order to vet stories for true horror, I had to experience it myself. The terror I felt was exquisite. The fear mixed with gratitude. It was invaluable to have a personal objective standard with which I could reference to sanctioned stories. Despite my rationalization that this was a simulation, I instinctively ran towards the door. The thing dove to intercept my sudden start, and a claw-like grip closed around my ankle, tripping me. I threw my arms out and landed hard. It was getting too real. I had signed nothing to consent to them actually harming me. I tried to pop onto my knees to protest when searing pain exploded under my left shoulder blade. The momentum of the strike pinned me to the ground, and I felt the fingers of the creature rend and twist in the wound. I felt its other hand pierce through the cloth and flesh. It was rooting around my lungs, literally stealing my breath. In my terror and confusion, I thought this must be a mistake. The adrenaline gave way to shock and I started to fade. The clunk of the door lock mingled with the squelching sound of my gore. It took everything I had to lift my head to see black high heels clicking towards me. Everything went dark as I reached out to her. I was back in the waiting room. I breathed in the sweet, musty air. My body was whole. How had she done this? Had she drugged me? I went to leave, only to find the door I had originally entered through was simply a smooth wall. I was furious that they'd go this far. I demanded to be allowed to leave immediately. I told her I got the message, but I wouldn't go through a near-death experience just to learn some stupid lesson about fear, let alone be a moderator on Reddit.
You've learned nothing.
She murmured.
And you absolutely will help.
The door behind the reception desk creaked open, and a brilliant light flooded the room. Something jumped onto my chest, and it startled me awake. My cat bounced off of me and ran into the kitchen. I was home, laying on the couch. I bolted to the windows only to find a beautiful spring day. My wife, Lucy, was filling goodie bags at the dining room table with her foot rocking a cradle. Our youngest, Sophie, was asleep inside. Ben skipped into the room with the foil war balloon. He gave me a hug, and I stood there, shocked. Lucy noticed me scanning the room, wild-eyed. She told Ben to go join the other kids outside and go for a jump. It wasn't a dream. This felt as real as that decrepit building. I told her the entire story. Her contempt turned into a genuine concern, but not because of believing me. She told me I'd been reading too many scary stories, and that the priority was our son's birthday. I went into the backyard to find happy kids and conversing parents. A small bounce house teemed with laughter. The Hendersons arrived and their little one ran off to join the writhing mass of sugar-filled chaos. I was still glancing around nervously when Mrs. Henderson asked where the birthday boy was. A van emblazoned with Snickers the Clown pulled out of the driveway. "Hey, did you pay the clown?" I called.
"What clown?"
asked Lucy. A flash of white and I awoke on my couch. Sometimes I remember nothing. Sometimes I remember remembering nothing. In those cases, I'd go months shut in or just driving, knowing there were no consequences. Invariably, I'd realize the antecedent to some horrible event, and in a flash, it would all reset. The final time, I thought I had all my memories of what was happening to me. It was a hot summer, and as per my usual reset routine, I just hopped in the car and left without a word. My family members were often the victims of these scenarios, so it was imperative I get as far away as possible. I spent a few hours in a cafe ruminating and planning my next moves. My phone blew up with messages, as it usually did when Lucy realized things were off. I returned to the car to find Sophia strapped into the back seat. The flash of a reset brought me to the waiting room. The weight of everything I'd seen crashed down on me. I watched my loved ones damned to grisly fates over and over again. It was effectively real. Even if this was a trick or some hallucination, I'd spent more time in these scenarios than I'd had lived in my first life. The memories of all the resets inundated me. Connections to events and people in different instances overlapped and took on new meaning. An exponential series of chain reactions compounded as I came close to grasping the full implications of the abominations that took place. Pieces of me, doomed to die those ghastly deaths. Many, I felt, were more me than I was. The instances were so intricately intertwined that I knew these scenarios continued on without me. And nothing had actually happened to me. When I had no memory of this torture, At no point before a reset did I feel any fear. The fear was not for me in this case. It was horrifying because it was horrible. Camden looked up from her work and flashed a sinister grin.
You must go through one more door. For prosperity, which would you prefer?
I dug my nails into the first door and pleaded to be ripped limb from limb by the revenant within. The skeleton popping out of the closet was so much more desirable than even one of those resets. She chuckled and seemed to make a note of my response. The final door swung open. An inky black mess seeped into the waiting room. Camden paid no attention to the plutonian tendrils that enveloped her and the space. I pressed myself into a corner in a futile attempt to avoid the gaping abyss. I consider this the moment I ceased to be. I'm fairly confident versions of me persisted and died during those first 2 trials. Cowering in that corner, as scared as I was. At least it was real to me. Those last few seconds in the waiting room were the freshest memories I had for the eons that would follow. I found myself floating in the void of space, my only faculty sight. Stretching on forever were stars and nebula. My other senses strained uselessly to detect anything. The first few days and weeks I spent coming to terms with the phantom sensations. How mundane it was to feel unseen hands stroke my face, or hear my name rumbled throughout all the universe. I could spend a decade crying, a century screaming. It all melded into the same annihilation of existence. I was concurrently nothing, and the only thing to bear witness to that, nothing. Massive celestial bodies that I would take as static for millennia would all at once shift with the nimble dexterity that evidenced sentience. My perception eventually devolved into a constant flux of time and space. I swapped sizes with galaxies and atoms in a continuous mind-melting undulation. I was cursed with an immunity to the relentless march of oblivion and glimpsed its pestilence unfold on a cosmic scale. This fear wasn't personally visceral. It wasn't for someone else. It simply was. It was dread. I was merely an arbitrary, ephemeral vessel. After an eternity, a millisecond, I was sitting at the reception desk in the waiting room in front of the old computer. My task set before me. I feel the full extent of my ordeal hovering just on my peripheral, like an ocean held at bay by a thread. Paradoxically, it takes a conscious effort to avoid coming into contact with it. If it ever broke, I'd surely ruin this numb husk I've become. I assume I'm being assisted with this. I can only access Nosleep and users relevant to my work. All I can do is respond to messages and reports. I've tried a few times to call for help, even make coded distress signals. The message just changes or deletes itself after I hit send. It leads me to conclude that my work here is completely pointless. It takes far more effort to imprison and censor me than I exert responding to rule violations, or what have you. The story suddenly stopped. I just have a blanket statement to respond to blackout inquiries. I finally had a long enough break to write out my story and see if posting it works. I don't know how long they'll let this stay up. I have the fondest memories of that sweet nothing between resets. I'd do anything to get a similar reprieve from existence. Until now, I've never had a chance to stop. No reset, no sleep.